The narrative revolves around a husband's disturbing fixation that ultimately drove him to poison his wife in order to pursue a relationship with her daughter. Carol McMillan, a 48-year-old woman with ambitious aspirations and a devoted family, resided in Shaker Heights, Ohio. She was a well-regarded member of her community, recognized for her amiable disposition and radiant smile. Carol was the type of individual who would always take the time to engage in conversation with her neighbors and was eager to lend a helping hand whenever necessary. Actively involved in local affairs, she frequently participated in church activities and organized neighborhood gatherings. Her friendly demeanor endeared her to all who crossed her path. Carol lived in a delightful two-story residence situated on a tree-lined street in Shaker Heights, a suburb of Cleveland celebrated for its stunning architecture and strong community spirit. The area is often characterized by its bohemian chic atmosphere, marked by progressive politics, a blend of historic and contemporary homes, local CAFS, and a lively art scene. Carol's home was adorned with family photographs, comfortable furnishings, and a kitchen that perpetually exuded the aroma of freshly baked cookies. An enthusiastic cook, she was particularly famous for her chocolate chip cookies, which she frequently shared with colleagues and neighbors alike. Carol was married to Daniel McMillan, a man 16 years her junior, and despite the age gap, their relationship was characterized by mutual affection. Daniel and Carol appeared to be a joyful couple. Daniel was employed at a health insurance company, which often kept him occupied. However, the couple prioritized their time together. They had been married for 5 years and resided with Sarah Linsky McMillan, Carol's 19-year-old daughter from a previous marriage. Sarah was a bright and ambitious college student aspiring to become a doctor, and Carol took great pride in her daughter's pursuits, offering her unwavering support. In the weeks leading up to her untimely death, Carol was enthusiastically planning a family vacation to Orlando. She frequently discussed the trip and had recently acquired a new suitcase, which she was filling with summer attire, sunscreen, and a new pair of sandals. Carol cherished moments spent with her family and eagerly anticipated the vacation. Tragically, her excitement was abruptly halted when, on the morning of April 17, 2019, she was discovered deceased in her home. That morning, Shaker Heights was just beginning to awaken. It was a cool, overcast day typical of Ohio's spring season. The neighborhood was tranquil, with only a few early risers walking their dogs or picking up their morning coffee from Starbucks. Carol McMillan, known for being an early riser, seemed to be in distress that day. At approximately 8:30 a.m., Sarah Linsky McMillan descended to the kitchen and found her mother lying unresponsive on the floor, next to a can of Carol's favorite beverage, Diet Pepsi, which had spilled onto the floor. The sugary liquid began to seep into the grout between the tiles. In a state of panic, Sarah screamed and immediately dialed 911, her hands trembling as she made the call. The operator's voice attempted to soothe her, but Sarah was too distraught, crying and pleading for someone to arrive swiftly. When the paramedics arrived just minutes later, they discovered Sarah in a state of shock, pacing anxiously in the living room. The house was hauntingly silent, save for the lingering sound of the 911 call emanating from Sarah's phone on the kitchen counter. The paramedics hurried to Carol's side, but it was too late. Carol was pronounced dead at the scene. Sarah struggled to comprehend the situation. Just the day before, her mother had been enthusiastically discussing their upcoming vacation, selecting outfits, and making plans. Now, she was gone, leaving Sarah feeling adrift and desolate. As the paramedics worked, Sarah reached out to her stepfather, Daniel McMillan, who was at work. His reaction was one of utter despair. He began to wail, nearly screaming, as Sarah wept into the phone. He assured her he would leave work immediately, but his voice was nearly unhinged with grief. The Shaker Heights Police Department promptly responded to the incident at the McMillan residence. Detective Laura Robotek, a seasoned investigator with over 15 years of experience, took charge of the case. Known for her keen observation and systematic methodology, she had a reputation for cracking even the most complex cases. Upon her arrival at the scene on the morning of April 17, 2019, she immediately sensed that something was amiss. The McMillan home appeared to be a typical, well-maintained suburban residence, complete with a tidy lawn and a garden beginning to show the first signs of spring. Inside, the house was orderly and clean, the only indication of turmoil being the tragic events that had unfolded. A clear indication that something was amiss was the lifeless body of Carol McMillan sprawled on the kitchen floor, accompanied by a can of Diet Pepsi, a nostalgic favorite in America, which had spilled around her. Detective Robotech and her team commenced their investigation by securing the crime scene, promptly erecting yellow tape around the house's perimeter and assigning officers at the entrance to deter onlookers and neighbors from approaching. The investigators meticulously scrutinized the kitchen, noting the absence of forced entry and that everything appeared in order. Carol's purse remained untouched on the counter, and the back door was locked from the inside. The team observed that the Diet Pepsi can was still mostly full, with only a small amount of liquid spilled on the floor, which piqued Detective Robotech's interest. She directed the crime scene unit to collect the can as evidence, along with the remaining liquid. Additionally, samples were taken from the kitchen counter and floor to test for any unusual substances. The scene was photographed from various angles to ensure thorough documentation of every detail. An autopsy was requested to ascertain the precise cause of Carol's death. While the paramedics on the scene suspected a heart attack, Detective Robotech harbored doubts. The positioning of Carol's body and the fact that she had been consuming her favorite soda moments prior raised her suspicions. As the investigation progressed, the detectives meticulously searched the house for further clues, examining Carol's personal belongings for any indications of foul play, including her phone. Evidence was also collected with the aim of reviewing her recent calls and messages. Detective Robotech understood that this case necessitated a thorough investigation, as there was significantly more to Carol's death than initially apparent. With the inquiry into Carol McMillan's death underway, the police focused on those who were closest to her. The first individual they interrogated was her husband, Daniel McMillan. At 32 years old, Daniel was considerably younger than Carol and was employed at a health insurance company in Cleveland, where he was known for his good looks, charm, and success. He appeared to lead an enviable life, complete with a stable job, a comfortable home, and a loving family. However, as the detectives delved deeper, they revealed a different aspect of Daniel's character. Daniel had met Carol 6 years prior while working as a junior analyst at the insurance firm. At that time, Carol, a widow, was captivated by his youthful vigor and self-assurance. They married a year later, and Daniel took on the role of stepfather to Sarah, who was 13 at the time. Although their marriage seemed strong on the surface, friends observed that Daniel had grown increasingly distant from Carol over the past year. He frequently worked late hours and often claimed to be traveling for business. During his initial police interview, Daniel appeared composed, albeit somewhat detached. He expressed disbelief at Carol's death, yet his emotional response seemed subdued. He informed Detective Laura Robotech that he had been at work when the incident occurred and had hurried home as soon as Sarah contacted him. When questioned about his relationship with Carol, Daniel asserted that they had a good marriage, although he acknowledged that they had drifted apart. Over time, he maintained that he had no involvement in her death and was perplexed as to why anyone would wish to harm her. However, as the interview progressed, Detective Robotech's suspicions intensified. Daniel appeared excessively composed and controlled. When questioned about Carol's plans, Daniel was evasive, asserting that he identified as a feminist and did not monitor his wife's daily activities. He also struggled to remember the last time they had an intimate conversation or engaged in sexual relations as a couple. Robotech found it peculiar that Daniel, who professed to love his wife, seemed so detached from her life. The detectives noted discrepancies in Daniel's accounts. For instance, he stated that he was aware Carol's preferred beverage was Diet Pepsi, yet he could not explain the presence of a half-empty can beside her body when she was discovered. He claimed that Carol frequently consumed soda but appeared unfamiliar with her other habits or routines. As the police continued their interrogation of Daniel, they began to contemplate his possible motives. Could he have desired to escape the marriage, or was there a more sinister reason behind his actions? The investigation into Daniel's life uncovered hidden secrets, one of the most startling being his inappropriate obsession with his stepdaughter, Sarah. This revelation provided the police with a new lead. If Daniel harbored feelings for Sarah, it might clarify his motive for wanting Carol out of the picture. However, establishing Daniel's involvement in Carol's death would necessitate substantial evidence. Detective Robotech understood the importance of being meticulous as they worked to assemble the intricate puzzle that was beginning to unfold. The next individual investigated by the police was Sarah Levinsky McMillan, the 19-year-old daughter of Carol from a previous marriage. Sarah was an intelligent and determined young woman, well on her path to becoming a physician. She was a pre-med student at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, where she had received a scholarship in recognition of her academic excellence. Known for her kindness and commitment to her studies, Sarah frequently volunteered at local hospitals and tutored underprivileged students. She had always looked up to her mother, viewing Carol as a paragon of strength and compassion. The two shared an incredibly close relationship, often spending weekends shopping, watching films, or simply discussing life while nestled together in bed. Carol had been Sarah's primary source of support, particularly following the death of Sarah's biological father when she was just a child. This loss had created an exceptionally strong bond between them, making Carol's sudden passing all the more devastating for Sarah. When the police first approached her, Sarah was visibly shaken. The anguish of losing her mother was intensified by the shock of discovering her lifeless body. Sarah informed the detectives that she had been studying for an upcoming biology exam when she decided to take a break for a snack. Upon entering the kitchen, she found her mother on the floor, unresponsive, with a can of Diet Pepsi nearby. In a state of panic, Sarah called 911, desperately hoping it was not too late. Throughout the interview, she was cooperative yet deeply emotional, describing her mother's recent demeanor as happy and content, with no indications of stress or distress. Sarah found it difficult to conceive of anyone who would wish to harm Carol, whom she described as universally loved by those who knew her. When the police inquired about her relationship with Daniel, her stepfather, Sarah spoke fondly of him, characterizing him as a kind-hearted individual and a supportive father figure. Unbeknownst to her, however, was Daniel's hidden sexual obsession with her, a revelation that heightened the police's concerns and suspicions. As the detectives investigated further into Sarah's life, they uncovered no evidence suggesting her involvement in her mother's death. Her alibi was confirmed. She had been in her room focused on her studies at the time of the murder. Her social media activity reflected the typical life of a college student, featuring posts about academics, friendships, progressive political issues, and upcoming examinations. There were no indications of clandestine relationships or concerning behavior. Nevertheless, the police remained wary of the dynamics within the McMillan household, contemplating whether Sarah might have been an unwitting participant in Daniel's schemes. If Daniel's obsession with Sarah was as profound as they suspected, it could imply that she was also at risk. For the moment, however, there was no evidence connecting Sarah to the crime, prompting the detectives to redirect their focus. The third individual questioned by the police was Jessica Miller, Carol's closest friend and confidant. At 45 years old, Jessica was a real estate agent who had known Carol for over a decade. The two women had forged a strong bond through their shared experiences as working professionals in Shaker Heights, becoming inseparable over the years. Jessica was frequently seen at Carol's residence, assisting with community events or simply enjoying an evening glass of wine. Those who knew them perceived their friendship as unbreakable, founded on trust and mutual respect. However, the police soon uncovered that Jessica had been concealing a significant secret. Despite her apparent loyalty to Carol, Jessica had engaged in an affair with Daniel McMillan. This revelation astonished everyone familiar with the trio, particularly in light of the deep bond shared between Jessica and Carol. According to Jessica, the affair commenced approximately a year prior to Carol's death, beginning innocently when Daniel attended one of Jessica's renowned hot tub gatherings alone. Following some flirtatious exchanges, the situation rapidly escalated into a full-fledged sexual relationship. Jessica confessed to feeling a degree of guilt for betraying her friend but claimed she could not resist Daniel, whom she described as attractive. During her police interview, Jessica appeared anxious and defensive, aware that her affair with Daniel cast suspicion upon her. Nevertheless, she maintained that she had no involvement in Carol's death. Jessica expressed sadness over Carol's passing and even contemplated reducing her encounters with Daniel due to her feelings of guilt. However, she also disclosed that Daniel had recently informed her he was in love with another woman, which left her heartbroken. Although Jessica was unaware of the identity of this other woman, she suspected it might be someone younger, possibly Sarah. The detectives pressed Jessica for further information regarding her sexual relationship with Daniel and her activities on the day of Carol's death. Jessica stated that Jessica had attended a real estate showing in Cleveland Heights, accompanied by clients who could corroborate her alibi. The police followed up on this information, confirming that Jessica was indeed with clients at the time of the murder. However, they could not dismiss the possibility that she might have been involved in some capacity, given her emotional distress and jealousy regarding Daniel's changing affections. Despite her alibi, Jessica remained a person of interest in the investigation. Her affair with Daniel, coupled with her close ties to Carol, rendered her a complex figure in the case. The police had to contemplate whether Jessica's jealousy and heartbreak could have compelled her to take drastic action. Yet, in the absence of concrete evidence linking her to the crime, Jessica found herself in a precarious situation, torn between her guilt over the affair and her grief over the loss of her friend. On April 27, 2019, shortly after 9:00 a.m., the weather in Shaker Heights was cool and overcast, typical for an Ohio spring. As investigators continued their search for clues, they received a significant breakthrough in the case. A toxicology report from the lab indicated that the cause of Carol McMillan's death was cyanide poisoning. The lethal substance had been introduced into her can of Diet Pepsi, confirming that her death was not a natural occurrence but rather a calculated act of murder. The discovery of cyanide as the murder weapon astonished the investigative team. Cyanide is an uncommon yet lethal toxin frequently linked to high-profile espionage incidents. The detectives recognized that they were confronting a premeditated crime, as someone had gone to great lengths to orchestrate and carry out Carol's murder. This newly uncovered evidence redirected the investigation, providing law enforcement with a definitive path to follow. The detectives promptly returned to the crime scene in search of any remnants of the poison or indications of how it may have been introduced into Carol's beverage. They scrutinized the Diet Pepsi can, the surrounding kitchen area, and any containers or items that could have been in contact with the toxin. Forensic specialists were summoned to examine everything from the drink's residue to fingerprints on the can. Although no direct evidence of cyanide was discovered in the kitchen, the forensic team did identify traces of the poison on the rim of the can, confirming that it had been intentionally tampered with. This revelation, however, prompted further inquiries: who had access to the poison, and how was it introduced into Carol's drink without her awareness? The police began investigating the backgrounds of all potential suspects, searching for any history of chemical expertise or access to hazardous substances. They also reviewed recent purchases and online activities that might suggest someone had been researching or procuring cyanide. The detectives understood that cyanide is not easily obtainable, thus, whoever employed it had likely engaged in meticulous planning. This new evidence also intensified scrutiny on the suspects, leading the police to re-interview them with a focus on their knowledge of poisons and any suspicious behavior. The detectives were resolute in their pursuit of the truth surrounding Carol's death, intent on identifying who possessed both the means and the motive to execute such a calculated crime. With the investigation now firmly indicating murder, a renewed sense of urgency enveloped the case as they inched closer to uncovering the reality. On April 20, 2019, shortly before noon, the police achieved a significant breakthrough that would lead them directly to the perpetrator. Through meticulous examination of the evidence and re-interviews with the suspects, the detectives began to construct a troubling narrative. All indications pointed towards Daniel McMillan, Carol's husband, as the individual accountable for her demise. At 32 years of age, Daniel McMillan was perceived as a charming and accomplished man, employed at a health insurance firm. He appeared to lead an enviable life, complete with a stable career, a lovely wife, and an idyllic existence in the progressive community of Shaker Heights. However, beneath this facade lay a man consumed by dark and perverse sexual desires. Daniel had developed an unhealthy obsession with Sarah Linsky McMillan, Carol's daughter from a previous marriage. Secretly harboring inappropriate feelings for the 19-year-old, Sarah remained oblivious to his intentions. As his fixation intensified, Daniel grew increasingly estranged from Carol, viewing her as an impediment to his disturbing fantasy of a new life with Sarah as his spouse. The detectives uncovered critical evidence linking Daniel to the crime. An analysis of his internet search history revealed that he had been researching cyanide for several months prior to Carol's death, seeking information on its procurement, usage, and effects on the human body. The incriminating evidence indicated that Daniel had meticulously orchestrated the murder, intending to utilize cyanide to eliminate Carol without leaving any evidence. On the day of the crime, Daniel exploited Carol's daily habits, knowing her fondness for Diet Pepsi, which she consumed daily after work. Investigations revealed that Daniel had infused cyanide into her preferred beverage, anticipating that she would drink it immediately upon returning home. The poison acted swiftly, resulting in Carol's collapse and death within minutes. Daniel's intention was to stage the incident as a sudden heart attack. However, the toxicology report unveiled the reality. When confronted by the police with the amassed evidence, Daniel initially attempted to assert his innocence. Yet, as detectives laid out the facts, including his internet searches, his escalating obsession with Sarah, and the cyanide residue found on the can, his facade began to disintegrate. Daniel's arrest sent shockwaves through the Shaker Heights community, leaving Carol's friends and neighbors horrified to learn that the man they once regarded as a devoted husband had committed such a dreadful act. Sarah was heartbroken by this revelation, struggling to reconcile the image of the man she had seen as a father figure with the reality of his treachery against her mother. The trial of Daniel McMillan commenced on January 15, 2019, at the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas. The case garnered considerable media attention, with local news outlets extensively reporting on the proceedings, as the murder of Carol McMillan had deeply unsettled the Shaker Heights community, and many were eager for justice to be served. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney James Leakey, was recognized for his the meticulous and resolute approach taken by the prosecutor in the criminal case against Daniel McMillan presented a compelling argument. He contended that Daniel had premeditated the murder of Carol, citing the presence of cyanide in her Diet Pepsi and Daniel's extensive online searches related to the poison. The prosecutor characterized Daniel's behavior as cold and calculated, highlighting how his obsession with Sarah Linsky McMillan had driven him to commit the heinous act. Conversely, Daniel's defense attorney, Laura Phillips, sought to portray a contrasting narrative. She argued that Daniel was a man beset by personal difficulties and stress, which may have clouded his judgment. Phillips maintained that Daniel's actions were not premeditated but rather a consequence of mental instability. She attempted to assert that the direct evidence linking Daniel to the poison was insufficient, although the overall evidence against him was substantial. Throughout the trial, Carol's family, including Sarah, attended daily, visibly affected by the proceedings. Sarah, in particular, struggled with the harsh reality of her stepfather's betrayal and her mother's tragic death. The court heard poignant testimonies from Carol's friends and colleagues, who depicted her as a loving and compassionate individual, incapable of envisioning such a violent demise. After several days of testimony and evidence presentation, the jury deliberated and reached a verdict on January 22, 2019, finding Daniel McMillan guilty of first-degree murder. The judge subsequently sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The family and friends of Carol experienced a blend of relief and sorrow upon the verdict. While they acknowledged that justice had been achieved, the anguish of losing Carol and the betrayal by Daniel would linger. The verdict provided a sense of closure to the case, yet it left a profound impact on all those involved. Carol's loved ones faced the challenge of reconciling with the aftermath of the trial, striving to rebuild their lives while cherishing the warmth and kindness that Carol had shared with them. The trial served as a poignant reminder of the hidden darkness that can exist beneath seemingly perfect exteriors. Following the trial and the conviction of Daniel McMillan, life in Shaker Heights gradually began to normalize, but the repercussions of the case were deeply felt by the community. The McMillan family underwent irrevocable changes, and the community grappled with the aftermath of the crime. Daniel McMillan was transferred to the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, where he commenced his life sentence. His trial garnered significant media attention, making him a well-known figure within the prison system, a stark contrast to the luxurious life he had previously led. Coverage of his case persisted for some time, with numerous local outlets reporting on his adaptation to prison life and his interactions with fellow inmates. Sarah Linsky McMillan, Carol's daughter, faced a challenging path ahead. At the time of her mother's tragic death, she was a pre-med student, profoundly affected by the murder. After the trial, Sarah decided to take a hiatus from her studies to prioritize her mental health and process the trauma she had endured in the preceding months. Support from friends, family, and professional counselors played a crucial role in her recovery. The community rallied around her, and many admired her resilience and strength during such a challenging period. Jessica Miller, a former friend of Carol and Daniel's secret lover, also faced the repercussions of the case. Although she was cleared of any involvement in the murder, her affair and connection to Daniel rendered her a controversial figure. The negative publicity adversely affected Jessica's real estate business, prompting her to relocate to another city in hopes of starting anew and leaving the past behind to rebuild her career and personal life. In time, Carol's friends and family sought to regain a sense of normalcy. They concentrated on cherishing her memory and continuing the community initiatives she had passionately supported. The case served as a stark reminder of how swiftly life can be disrupted by betrayal and violence, leaving enduring scars on all those involved. As time went on, the initial shock of Carol McMillan's murder began to fade, yet the emotional wounds left behind remained permanent. Shaker Heights, known for its close-knit community and tranquil environment, was forever altered by the tragic events that transpired within its confines. Carol's friends and family gradually resumed their daily lives, but the void she created was irreplaceable. Those who knew her continued to honor her legacy by engaging in the activities and causes she cherished. In her memory, the community established the Carol McMillan Foundation, dedicated to the charitable work she had been so deeply involved in. The foundation, established to assist underprivileged children and families in the community, quickly emerged as a testament to Carol's lasting legacy, serving as a means for her spirit to continue to inspire and uplift those in her vicinity. For Sarah Linsky McMillan, the path forward was gradual and fraught with difficulty. The trauma of her mother's sudden passing and the revelation of her stepfather's sinister motives had left her with deep emotional wounds. Although she initially paused her pre-med studies, Sarah ultimately returned to Case Western Reserve University, driven by the aspiration to realize her mother's dream of her becoming a physician. The journey proved challenging, yet with the unwavering support of her friends, family, and community, Sarah discovered the resilience to endure. She frequently shared her story at local events, advocating for mental health awareness and emphasizing the significance of seeking assistance during difficult times. Daniel McMillan, once a respected figure in the Shaker Heights community, gradually faded into obscurity while serving his life sentence. His once promising career and bright future were reduced to a succession of bleak days behind bars. The narrative that had once captivated public interest during the trial eventually devolved into yet another tragic account of a life derailed. In prison, Daniel's existence became monotonous and filled with remorse, as his actions not only obliterated his own life but also inflicted irreparable harm on those he professed to love. Jessica Miller's choice to leave Shaker Heights and embark on a new chapter was both a blessing and a curse. While she managed to escape the surrounding gossip and judgment, the decision came with its own set of challenges. The affair and subsequent trial compelled her to confront her own involvement in the tragic events. Relocating to a new city provided Jessica with a chance to reconstruct her life. However, she frequently grappled with feelings of guilt and shame. She immersed herself in her professional endeavors, believing that achieving success in her career might serve as a form of atonement for her past errors. Despite the physical distance and the passage of time, the connection between Jessica and Sarah endured. The two women maintained their correspondence, offering mutual support as they navigated the challenging trajectories their lives had taken. Jessica, in particular, was resolute in her commitment to be there for Sarah, aiming to provide a semblance of comfort and stability in the years that followed. As time progressed, Shaker Heights gradually returned to its usual rhythm, yet the memory of Carol McMillan's murder persisted, serving as a poignant reminder that even the most seemingly idyllic communities are not exempt from the darker facets of human nature. The case became woven into the fabric of local history, often recounted in hushed tones and utilized as a cautionary tale. For Sarah, Jessica, and the rest of Carol's loved ones, life would forever be altered. The anguish of losing Carol would remain with them, but so too would the invaluable lessons learned about resilience, forgiveness, and the significance of supporting one another in the face of unimaginable hardship. Though Carol McMillan's life was tragically truncated, her legacy continued to resonate with those who knew her. Her kindness, generosity, and dedication to her community inspired others long after her departure. The Carol McMillan Foundation expanded each year, assisting more families in preserving her memory in a manner that honored the values she cherished. As for Shaker Heights, the town where these events unfolded, it remained a place of beauty and community, now imbued with a deeper understanding of life's complexities and the ever-present potential for both good and evil.